All right, Pat, there's a lot to chat about today. We are here at Capital One Arena, and I'm going to call this chat the sweet and sour chat, possibly, right?
I like that. I like what you did there.
I used to really love, when I was a kid, sweet and sour chicken when I would go to a Chinese restaurant. And it just kind of reminds me of what's happening on today in particular. We're getting ready for Duke to play in the Sweet 16, and they're getting some pretty sweet news along with it. But over in Raleigh, Will Wade is out. He's a one and done. I thought the one and dones were supposed to be a Duke.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think I'll throw another flavor in there for you. Bitter, right?
Yeah.
Because Will Wade, good riddance. Red Reckoning. How about a resignation email? Because that's how Boo Corrigan found out from Wade's agent.
Sheesh.
After a series of conversations privately between them and then publicly with all of us that he was coming back. Yeah. And these LSU rumors have been out there for a long time now. You know, I have sources at the ACC tournament telling me that they were bowl. Well, that was probably somebody covering for Wade at the time. I even said at the time, you take everything with a grain of salt. Wade went on the podium, then went on the podium after their early exit from the NCAA tournament. But I think all along we should have known, right?
Yeah.
Where there's smoke, there's fire, especially
Yeah.
given this guy's resume in college basketball.
It really feels like NC State got played here. You know what I'm saying? Like there was another analogy that was on Twitter or X that I really enjoyed. Can't quite talk about it right here. But basically it's saying that NC State got played. You got the pretty girl, you dressed her up, and then all of a sudden, well, you know, some stuff happens and she goes off with another guy. And this is what it was. Like, you felt like that you had something locked in for the future. It always felt like Will Wade would have only been here for maybe 3 or 4 years anyway, right before the big job came calling. But I thought at least those 3 or 4 years, he'd be here, be happy, and things would happen, and, you know, NC State will get back on the map. He literally just kind of got fired from LSU, if we go back in 2022, spent a year off, then rehabbed his image with McNeese State for 2 years, and then all of a sudden people came calling, and NC State was the one, and it just felt like this was just a ploy for him to always get back to LSU. We had heard rumors before the season that there were donors that he was cool with from LSU who were willing to help him out with NIL here in Raleigh or over in Raleigh, because we're in DC right now. And if that was the case, that means they've been talking all along.
Yeah.
Right. And so you have to kind of wonder, you know, how does this feel if you are Boo Corrigan and the rest of his staff there in the athletics department? You really thought you had a sure thing, and all of a sudden it's going. The coaches portal is always open.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we have the transfer portal, is because coaches have operated like this for years.
Yeah.
And I think that he's going to fit in at LSU, is he not?
For sure.
With Lane Kiffin,
Kim Mulkey.
and Kim Mulkey.
What a trifecta.
And Kiffin, who had his unceremonious exit from Ole Miss, right? And I guess in some ways, maybe you should have seen this coming for all the reasons you did, but he did feel like a good fit initially, right? Like that initial press conference was one of the most electric opening press conferences I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
But I've also, when I was watching it, thought of The Wolf of Wall Street and sell me this pen. And Wade truly is that kind of salesman. He could have been a penny stockbroker if he wanted to be. He has that kind of charisma, but he's also got that little, lack of trust in his eye. I mean, and the only reason he rehabbed his image really is not because of what he's done. It's because of the rules changed.
For sure.
And, I can't necessarily blame Boo for taking the swing. And I imagine privately, maybe he's a little bit, I told you so, because from my understanding, that wasn't necessarily his first choice. But
I was just about to go there.
But, the name went out there and the donors caught wind and it went off and running. And, we saw a similar thing happen in Chapel Hill with Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
And, in college athletics, it isn't always the athletic directors that are actually making the hire. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, with the donors who have to essentially pay for these rosters nowadays. So they do deserve a say.
Let me break in right here really quick. This is probably NC State and now the Carolina situation that we had last year with Bill Belichick. This is probably a good example of why you should just trust the athletics director.
Look at Duke.
You hired them for a reason. Don't put your hands in the pot and stir it up into something that you don't know what you're getting yourself into. And now, we have these two situations now in Raleigh and then, of course, over in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, I mean, it's ironic coming on the heels of a sit down I just did with Nina King.
On the heels.
No pun intended there. Because she is the model right now for hiring and running an athletics program in the Triangle.
Yeah.
Now, Duke operates under a different set of principles, right? Like they have money that appears to be infinite in some ways, but we don't know what it is because they're private.
Right.
But I think we've got a pretty good idea. We certainly know that this year's Duke roster was the most expensive in the Triangle, and now they're funneling a lot of money into football. And she's made this series of hires now and been involved in hires even before she was officially, in practice as the AD of Kara Lawson. She was involved in that. The John Shire transition.
Sure.
2 different football coaches.
New baseball coach.
A new baseball coach. It's incredible. So hopefully everybody else is taking notes. But in a weird way, maybe this allows Boo to take control here.
For sure.
Right? Like we had the splashy donor hire, the big name, and then maybe now you could get somebody that isn't as sexy of a name on paper, but that fits with the school.
Absolutely.
And, like the first 2 names that were floated out to me were NC State former players, Justin Gainey from Tennessee, Archie Miller, who is currently, where is he right now? Rhode Island.
Yeah.
So, I don't know that those guys are necessarily the front runners, but they make sense on paper. And, there's something to like staying in the family. Like Carolina is going to have to go out of the family, but when you have somebody that really understands the culture, play for this culture, values it, they're more likely to stay and uphold the values that you and your fan base, represent.
And I think also I would probably guess that Boo would wish that he knew this a little bit sooner so that maybe he could get on in somebody like a Wes Miller, right? Even though he's a Carolina guy, I think Wes Miller would have been a good fit as well, but now he's over at UNC Charlotte. So, but I still think there's good enough coaching candidates out there. The main thing is for Wolfpack Nation is to give whoever is hired a little bit of patience, right? Mm-hmm. Let them go through the first year, see what happens, expect some results in year 2, year 3, but the program in general, and this is something that Boo Corrigan brought up, is that they need to make sure that the money is there to fund these programs because that's what it is now.
Yeah.
Right? And we saw, Will Wade spent more money on Darian Williams than what Kevin Keats had all of his final year as a head coach at NC State. You're going to need to continue to fund for these players and to have money to be coming in so you can get the good players in the transfer portal. And the transfer portal opens up April 7th. So NC State is going to have to make this situation really fast so they can get a move on and try to get somebody in-house really quick.
Yeah, it's my understanding that they are, a little bit behind where they'd like to be in that regard. Because to your point, I think Boo took him at his word. And, Boo's kind of an old school guy. I respect that about him, and who can blame him, right? Like, where are we without our word, right? Yeah. So it's unfortunate that it ended that way. And just it's funny. Like now we have this villain. Like Will Wade was always a villain, but now he is a villain that will never be forgotten in Pack history, right?
Yeah.
This guy, the promises he came in here with, like when you are a blowhard like that, man, you better win, right? Because it's hard to maintain that kind of thing. We saw that in season, like him kind of short-circuiting with his messaging to the fan base, to his own team. And, he's almost like failing up in a way. Like I know he was at LSU, but this season was not a success.
They just like him a lot. They didn't want to fire him from the beginning.
Yeah, they was kind of forced their hand, right, from an FBI wiretap and a strong blank offer, I guess it's good riddance, right? But just digging into his season a little bit more, Chris, it's not like they didn't have resources for him. Were they as much maybe as he had hoped? Was it as much as Carolina? Was it as much as Duke? No. And I know they didn't get the big man that they wanted or didn't have the money to play in that pool, but they also spent a lot on Darian Williams. Mm-hmm. They bring this whole roster in, and they champion, analytics to us and all their models. And I took that at its word too, just like Wade. And it just didn't play out on the court. The whole tenure to me, and I really like a lot of people on the staff, so I'm not taking away from them. But just like Wade is the figurehead, the whole tenure to me is arrogance. It's a lot of arrogance and hubris. And it's ironic that he gets promoted. He's not being fired. He's being promoted ultimately to the SEC.
And it did feel like there was a shift, and you alluded to this, a shift in his personality. I think you were mentioning that when you said he was short-circuiting.
Yeah.
There was a shift in his personality and the way that he kind of dealt with the media and his public face. and it was probably around, I guess, what was the Texas Southern game, or I can't remember.
That's when it really started, yeah.
And you started noticing like his eyes felt a little bit more shifty. He seemed a little bit more unhappy. That first time when he came out in their very first game of the season, he comes out with the emphatic fist pump and he's excited for everybody. And then he just starts coming out and he's kind of looking down. He's not really giving eye contact to everybody. He didn't look happy himself. I thought it was more so maybe the guys he was coaching, because that's kind of what he was alluding to in press conferences. I guess he just didn't want to be in Raleigh. And it felt like, not necessarily buyer's remorse for him, but like seller's remorse. He sold himself and, he didn't want to necessarily be here and give his services to NC State. So now he's heading to Baton Rouge. And, I would love to see him, Kim Mulkey, and Lane Kiffin all sit down and have a dinner, because what a trio that is down there for LSU.
My gosh. And can we get maybe an NC State versus, LSU, ACC, SEC challenge? I mean, how good TV would that be?
Oh, ESPN is going to dial that up.
I mean,
and it's going to be at the Lenovo Center too.
They're cutting the package right now. They're emailing us.
It's happening.
Hey, can you send us that the Red Reckoning, I believe it is, soundbite? I'm like, oh yeah, I've got that on lock. It's just like on my phone. I just play it every day just for fun.
And will any former Wolfpack players be on the LSU roster? Let's not worry about that right now.
Ooh, yeah.
Let's not worry about.
Kenny Copeland's out of eligible. I can't follow him to McNeese.
There's one person in mind. I don't want to say the name because I don't want to stir anything up. But there's one person in mind that could possibly work with. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about Duke. This is why we're here in Washington, D.C., Sweet 16. They're taking on St. John's and Rick Pitino tomorrow. Look at all the coaches that are here.
Incredible.
John Shire is like the next thing. He's the next big thing. But he has to go up against Rick Pitino. And then if he wins this one, then it's either Tom Izzo or Dan Hurley. Dan Hurley is like the current big thing with the 2 back-to-back championships. And of course, Izzo has his championship from before. And this is a lot here. Feels like this could be a Final Four just here for the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight. But focusing on St. John's, Duke may have some good news because St. John's is a very, very physical team. You may have to ensure that you have your entire roster available. And Caleb Foster was out here practicing earlier today. His dad talked to me last week in Greenville. I didn't talk about this publicly.
You've had indications on this for a while, yeah.
But his dad essentially gave me a strong indication that he felt like his son was going to play. I won't say his exact words, but he felt like his son was going to play this weekend. And then I had another conversation with him earlier today, and he told me 50-50. And I was like, hey, can I put that out? Yes, you could put it out. We put it out there. Later on, we saw Caleb Foster out here. It was funny seeing him roll up.
And just walking right off.
And just walk right off.
Yeah.
It's literally all for precaution. It looked like he was moving around fine. We didn't see him full contact, jumping.
The open practice was basically stretching, but
so, but it feels like John Shire feels like there's a chance too, because he confirmed that it's a game time decision for him tomorrow.
And look, whether he plays in this game or the next round, like we are in crunch time here, and we've seen the cracks in Duke's armor.
For sure.
With Gangba and Foster on the bench. Everything kind of slotted back into its right place, to quote Radiohead, when Gangba came back, right? Like everybody just looked right on the floor, and it frees up Boozer to do so much. He's like the skeleton key for them, but Foster is the X factor. He's experience, and this is a team full of young players. These games and this round and going forward come down to one play.
For sure.
And Caden Boozer, as good as he's been in the wake of Foster's injury, he's still a freshman.
Yeah.
And we saw like the big lights of the Siena game had Duke a little bit off.
Yeah.
And they admitted that to us in the locker room. So I think, Foster isn't necessarily as integral as Gangba was, but like a play from him, and he always seems to make them too.
Yeah.
Right? Like a lot like Jeremy Roach, I think Foster has kind of inherited that role.
Yeah, Duke doesn't need him to do too much. You said it, maybe some short minutes, maybe 10 to 15. We'll see what ends up happening if he does play. But it's another ball handler. Like Caden Boozer has been playing a lot of minutes since the ACC tournament, and a little bit before that in that Carolina game where Foster got injured. And there's a couple games there where Caden Boozer essentially didn't come out at all. he's going to be able to rest a little bit, maybe even play alongside Caleb Foster. And I felt like there were times in the ACC tournament, maybe times versus Siena, where you needed that experienced guard to just say, hey, guys, let's slow it down a little bit. Let's make the right play. Hey, how about you do this, you do this, you do this. Let's get in the right position. You set this screen, and we're going to go ahead and score this bucket. That's what you needed Caleb Foster for. Mm-hmm. You also needed Caleb Foster to be the other guy or another guy who can hit an open shot, because Duke hasn't really been shooting it well as of late. They haven't been really great with a three in the entire season, but the guys they can really count on to hit those threes have been Cameron Boozer, have been Isaiah Evans, have been Caleb Foster. Yeah. Those are the guys that shoot it at the highest percentage from behind the line. So, like, he doesn't need to go out here and jam on anybody. He doesn't need to drive the ball too much. He just needs to help them take care of the ball, give them solid defensive minutes, and also hit some open corner threes. And that'll do wonders for Duke, even in just 10 to 15 minutes, if that's as much as he's going to be available.
And I think defensively, too, like his defensive savvy could be huge. Just a deflection, a steal.
For sure.
Something that stood out to me, I think, in his play last year in the ACC tournament when they were missing Cooper Flagg. We got to wrap it up pretty quickly, but we got to touch on this Rick Pitino quote that's probably going to be taken out of context because that's what the internet does. But he said here to a scrum of reporters that in the NIL era, essentially, UNC and NC State are basically the same job. Now,
there's two different ways you could take that.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I know what he's trying to say, which is basically like the tradition doesn't matter as much anymore.
Yeah.
You know, the uniform doesn't matter as much anymore if you got the money and you got the resources and you got the coach. I think that's fair, but I know that Pac fans are going to take that one kind of way.
And that's the part I was going to go to is, like, on the other side, Pac fans are going to be like, what do you mean?
Well, no, I think Pac fans are they like that, right? That's a compliment
if I'm
to them.
a Pac fan, I'm going to be upset with it because, like, you're saying that Carolina's down to our level?
Oh, okay, you're looking at it that way. So I thought maybe that fits State fans though, because everything's a slight.
Everything is a slight.
Because I thought it was a slight to UNC.
You should see my mentions in my email. Like, everything is a slight. So that's the way I took it just for State fans. It's like, wait, you saying that we're not as prestigious, so Carolina's down to our level now? What are you saying?
I mean, they did beat them this year pretty handily.
We have two national championships, and Vin Allen Lubin wanted to leave the friendly blue skies to come over to the Red Reckoning. What are you talking about?
Well, you know, Carolina fans are like, NC State they aren't even, UNC, they don't even look at NC State as a rival, as NC State is beating them on the football field, certainly in the basketball court, at least this season. But, I mean, I guess I'll say this. I do think tradition in the uniform still matters because, like, I was saying to Brian Murphy, who's on the camera over there earlier, like, I think a little bit of the narrative that, like, your school doesn't matter, tradition doesn't matter, is overstated because I've talked to families and parents and kids that came to schools. I hear this all the time. It wasn't about the money. Maybe that's something they're telling me, but off camera too. So I think that, like, yes, NIL has changed everything, but, like, there are still people out there that value the tradition, value the culture. Yeah. And, like, when you walk into Duke and you walk into UNC, it's impossible not to feel that around you. And obviously NC State has their own history too. You don't feel it as much in Lenovo as you do in Reynolds Arena. So I'm not saying that to take anything away from them.
For sure.
But I think the key point too is maybe, like, Duke has both.
Yeah.
They have all the resources, they're modernized, and they have their tradition, and UNC is trying to find that.
I said this on TV the other day. Basically, Duke is the standard right now for college basketball. Carolina's trying to find it. NC State is trying to find it. And hopefully we'll find you guys watching all of our videos, liking and subscribing, and making sure you hype it up as well. And we'll have more after the Sweet 16 tomorrow as Duke will take on St. John's at 7:10.